Welcome to Amateur Radio Digital Voice Modes. This video covers cross-mode operation with a DMR radio and an openSPOT 4 Pro. This video is presented by Gary C. Meyer, W0DYD, W0 Dunk Your Donuts, Shakopee, Minnesota. It's November 2022. Welcome to part 2 of setting up a 878 radio or any DMR radio with the openSPOT 4 Pro hotspot. In part 2 we will cover the following topics. First of all, setting up the openSPOT 4 Pro hotspot using the dashboard. If you're familiar with the Pi-Star dashboard setup, this one is quite different. Secondly, we'll cover the topic of setting up the Anytone 878 UV2+, the DMR radio using a computer with the CPS or the computer program software for cross-mode operation. And then thirdly, the operation of cross-mode, the operation of your radio, two different methods. Method number one is really for convenience, and there you would need to do the step 2 with some programming and the CPS. Method 2 is quite simple, no programming required. So you might desire one or the other of these two methods, and we'll cover both of them. Now let's set up the openSPOT 4 Pro using the dashboard. First of all, plug in the USB cable from your openSPOT into your computer. Then open up a browser on your computer and type in the URL, that is, go to sharkrf.link, and you should see this page pop up. Now, as shown by the red arrow, there's a number that needs to be typed in here. That number is your UID number for the openSPOT, which you'll find on the back of the openSPOT unit itself. Once you type in that number, just click on Connect. Next, you'll need to enter your login password that you set up for the openSPOT. After you have connected to your Wi-Fi, this will be the next page that we'll take a look at. And that is the openSPOT opening page here. Then will be the show the status. And what the status refers to here is the status of the hotspot in connection with other talk groups and who's making the call. Right in here we have the name of the talk group, and also some information about a limit. On a lot of these talk groups there's a 10-minute limit. And also the talk group number appears. Down below is the call letter of the person that's online. If this section is blue instead of gray, that means that station is transmitting. Over on the right hand side of that square you'll find whether you're on DMR, D-Star, or Fusion, or any of the other modes supported on the openSPOT 4. By clicking on the menu in the upper right, we'll go to the next page. After clicking on the menu, we get a menu bar that comes up here with several different choices. we looked at the status. The next one we want to select here is the connectors. The connectors then will allow us to set up connections to various talk groups or reflectors in the case of D-Star, YSF, and so we click on select here to go to the next page. As you scroll down to the next section here, see there's a couple of settings that you need to make sure are set correctly. One is the connector, and the auto or the active connector is shown above the box number 1, and we find the we can switch to several different ones by clicking on the blue button. But what we want to do for starting out here is to select homebrew/MMDVM. Down in the next section under the arrow number 2, we need to enter two things. One is the modem frequency, the one that we're using to transmit RF to our modem, and then also the modem mode. In our case, we're setting up a DMR, so in box number 3 there, you would select DMR. In order to set up the remainder of the openSPOT 4, we need to perform a few tasks here. If you haven't done this already, you need to obtain your DMR ID, as I mentioned previously, from http://radioid.net. Once you have that, you also need to create an account on the Brandmeister network. The Brandmeister network is one that hosts many different talk groups. So to create an account here, go to brandmeister.network and then set up a login password to this network. Once you're logged in, navigate to the self-care page. That will be in the menus on the left, and select a security password for your hotspot. This should be different than the network password, and this password will also be used to log in to the openSPOT 4 Pro dashboard to continue our setup. Next, under connectors, we scroll down just a little bit further, and we see several other items that we need to fill in here. The top one says that it's homebrew. That was a default, and I just left it there, and it seems to work okay there. The next one down is the server. The server that you want to connect to. There is a drop-down menu just to the right of that box, and I've selected the United States /3102. There are several servers that you can select from here. If one isn't working, you might try a different one. Fill in your call sign, fill in your DMR ID, and then in the next blank down, you need to put in the security password that you selected for your Brandmeister self-care page. So put that in here, and then the next one down is the default, and that was set at 2260, and I just left it at that point, and also leave it as a group call here. Next, you want to click on the menu item in the top menu bar, which says settings. And now we need to set up some what's called profiles. These profiles are associated with the control signals that we're going to be sending from our DMR radio. So we have a profile 1, and I have it set up as profile 1 has a profile name of DMR. And so whenever I send out a 9001, it's going to select the number 1 profile. If you, for instance, had D star programmed in as profile 1, then you would have to send in the 9001. So the control addresses there are selected depending on how you've set up these profiles. So what I did was to set up a DMR as being the first profile. Now there's a way of switching the switch that we talked about earlier from D star to fusion to D star to those 3 different modes, that is, by clicking on this blue change button here, and you can change between profiles this way. So we're going to set up 3 different profiles to go to our 3 different switch positions here. So here's setup number 1 as DMR, which means that in order to select DMR, then I'm going to have to put a control signal of a talk group 9001. So this shows then the different profile names that I've selected here. Number 1 is DMR. And then you'll notice the second one is set for D star, and I've also put a designation of 30C. That is a worldwide reflector on the D star network. So we need to program in one channel here, which we'll be setting up in another slide here. And then also the last one would be for the fusion or the C4FM. You could just call this fusion or C4FM or YSF or whatever you wanted to call it. It doesn't matter, because when we send out the 9003, it would go to this profile. As we scroll down just a little bit further, you see here that we have 2 blocks here, or 2 designations. One is for the source, and we're starting out here by putting this, the source is our DMR radio, and the destination, it's also going to the DMR, so kind of the straight through a hotspot here. Staying in the settings menu, we next need to set up for each individual mode. First of all, setting up the DMR mode, there are 2 blanks here. One is the color code, which the common number is 1 to leave in there, and also the your radio ID number here, your DMR ID number. The next would be the D star settings, and these are pretty well set up for you. The call letters and is just your own call letters would go in. Scrolling down just a little bit further, we have the settings for C4FM or YSF, and all that's required in here is just your call letters. In addition, you have the NXDN settings available here, and also the P25 settings. However, we're just going to be working with the first 3 there for this video. Next, select the modem button on the menu bar. This will bring up a couple of items to check, make sure they're set correctly. Since we're using a DMR radio, make sure that first blank there has the DMR in it, since we're using the DMR radio. and also that the programmed frequency is also pulled in there. You may not have to type it in if it's already there. There are two methods of sending the 9001, 2, and 3 talk groups to the openSPOT 4. I'm going to show you first one using a code plug and programming it into a code plug, and then the second method will be much simpler, using it without using a radio without the code plug as a tool for doing the switching. You still need a code plug in the radio to run it. But digital radios are programmed on a computer using a software program called a CPS, or a computer program software. The resultant file is called a code plug, and that code plug is exported or written to the radio to make it run. So we'll look at a way of using the code plug to set up some channels and a zone for making the switching possible for the different modes. And then there is another way which you can use manual dial to send these addresses or these talk group IDs to the openSPOT 4 to change modes as well. You just have to remember which modes are connected to what talk group addresses are. So let's go through the first one, and then we'll look at the second simpler method. However, it's not quite as helpful when trying to switch between channels, unless you remember the numbers there, or write them down on a piece of paper or notepad or something, and you can refer to those just to do the switching. You can also do the switching, as we mentioned previously, by using the dashboard instead of either one of these modes. So the dashboard changes the modes right within the openSPOT 4. Before diving into the CPS, we are going to take a look at the structure of a program and some of the things that we need to know and put into this CPS to make the radio work correctly. First of all, we've got a number of different pieces of nomenclature here. We've got a zone, a channel, a talk group, and a digital contact list. For those who are new to programming, you need to get familiar with these terms and what they mean. So I'll go through them just briefly here. First of all, under channels, we have to create a channel which is either a talk group, or it can be a command that we're putting into the CPS to do a control signal, such as we were talking about with the 878 having to put out an address of 9001, 2, and 3. So under channels, when we take a look at the program, we'll be looking at creating a channel for profile 1, a channel for profile 2, and profile 3. These profiles were associated back with the DMR, D-Star, and the C4FM. Also, we have what's called a zone, and a zone can be however you define it. It can be a particular number of stations within or talk groups, I should say, on DMR, within the state, or it could be within a region, could be within a country. In our case here, our selected zone is going to consist of the channels that we create for the 3 different profiles. There's also a digital section for programming here. One of those is talk groups, and in the talk groups we create a talk group that is associated with a number and a name. There are many of these already, but we are going to create those that would be able to do our control signals. So we associate a number and a name. For instance, we would associate profile 1 with DMR, and the number there would be 9001 as a command, and so forth. There's also a contact list that is normally programmed within the code plug. And this contact list, as you take a look at it, would consist of the call letters and names of all of the different stations that have IDs. Some DMR radios, for instance, you can only put in a few of these total IDs, such as the MD390, which holds 1,000 of the IDs. However, there are over 200,000. And so in the 878 UV2 Plus, it's possible to put in 500,000 different IDs. The reason you would want these in the digital contact list is that when you contact somebody, your radio sees their ID number, but it needs this contact list in your radio in order to pull up the information to display on the screen. And so we will take a look at how to program some of these items into your Anytone 878. When you run the CPS for the Anytone 878, this is the page that you'll see. It looks very much like a spreadsheet, and there's a menu on the left-hand side, and then the data is contained within the body of the spreadsheet here, or the CPS. This can be very intimidating if you haven't used spreadsheets before, or if you haven't done any programming or done any code plugs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the specifics on the code plug here, other than a modification to a code plug, if you're so inclined, that you can set that up to send out your control signals to the openSPOT 4. So let's take a look how to do that. The first step in our programming will be to create 3 different new channels, and these channels will be used as commands then for switching the openSPOT 4 Pro using the DMR radio. So as you see here, we've entered in 3 new contacts. One is called Profile 1 DMR, Profile 2 D-Star, Profile 3 C4 FM. You could give these any names that you wanted to. Here I made it convenient just to associate the mode with the profile. On the next page, we'll look at each one of these channels individually and setting up the parameters. Once the channel has been named, you can click on that name to bring up the parameters that need to be set for that particular channel. In this case, we've clicked on the Profile 3 for C4 FM. It brings up a channel information edit page. As we look at this page, on the next slide here, we'll see that see the parameters that need to be set. On the channel information edit page, here are the items that need to be set. First of all, we need to set up the frequencies for the hotspot. Also, besides the frequency settings, we need to set up the contact frequency information, which is defaulted to 0. We can leave it there. The next one is important that we select this off our drop-down menu to make sure it's digital. It may already be there. Since we're using a hotspot, the setting for the power here can be low on this channel, so we can adjust the transmit power on each channel. If we were using an analog channel, then it's going directly to a repeater. Then we would put this up at the high power, or on the 878 you can go to turbo power. The other parameters I think pretty well default. You can look through those. Don't think anything has to be changed in there. So that's the setup for the channel, and you go through this for each one of the channels for DMR and also for D-Star. For step number 2, we go over to the menu on the left-hand side and click on the contact and talk group selection as shown by the arrow on the left. And next we go over and for the 3 profiles that we have, the top one, which is DMR, click on the words there and it'll bring up this small drop down box, and in here is where we select the talk group DMR ID, and in the case of the first one here it's 9001. You do this and then click on OK. You do this also for the D-Star and the C4FM profiles, and set those to 9002 and 3 accordingly. For step 3, we need to create a zone in which we can put these channels that we have created. The channels could be pulled into any zone you want, but just for clarity and a little more easy to find, I've created a new zone called OS4 Control, openSPOT 4 Control. And that is created by, first of all, going over to the menu on the left-hand side and selecting Zone. And then from there, we need to have a name for that zone. How we created that was first of all to click on the zone name that is created here, and then notice that we also have that zone name up in the box on the upper right there. And now we can pull various channels into to the zone. And so what you do is you'll see those profiles 1, 2, and 3 over in the channels list since we created them. And now you select them individually, click on the little move button left to right, and select the 3 channels here. Plus I've added a couple others that I pulled over. One is the S Local 9, and the reason I've pulled this over is that the hotspot talks back to the radio on Local 9, the TG9 talk group. And so putting it here, then I can easily switch back and forth between each one of the profiles, and then quickly change it over to Local 9 and listen to the response to see whether or not the hotspot actually changed or not. Then I've also put in a reset BM here so that I might be able to disconnect from the Brandmeister network. The final step 4 is to create 3 new entries under digital contact list. So the first thing we need to select is the digital contact list, And then we need to find the bottom of that list. There's several numbers, as you notice, 1 to 20,000, I believe, yes, 1 to 20,000. And then there's 20,000 increments that you need to go down to find the very last one. And each increment will increase the numbers in the number on the left-hand column in the spreadsheet. Once we have found the end, or the very last entry, we can then create 3 new entries, one for DMR, D-Star, and C4FM. 2 things we need to set up in here. One is that it's a private call, and the other one is that we have a talk group ID number in the case of the 9000 series we've been using. We'll see how to do that on the next slide as we would click on the profile one, the DMR. Under the digital contact list that we saw in the previous slide, we click on profile 1 DMR. That gives us this little digital contact edit box. And in this box then we can select our private call. Have a choice here in the drop down menu, private or group call. We want to select private. And then we want to type in the number 9001 for that control signal for DMR. Now it's time to write the code plug into the radio and also to save the code plug. So here's the final steps in preparing the DMR radio. First of all, you want to save the code plug to your computer. Give it a specified location and file name so that you can recognize it and find it when you want to write the next step of the code plug back into the radio. In order to write that code plug into the radio, you need to plug in the programming cable. Make sure you have one that comes for your radio. Various cables are available on the market, and some of them will work, some of them won't. So plug the programming cable into your radio, and then also in the other end into the USB COM port on your computer. You need then to select the COM port. On the CPS in the upper menu bar you'll find the selection there, and normally it's the highest number COM port. Select that, try that one, and then under the program tab you select write to radio and then select OK. You should see a little blue line going across showing the writing, and then it'll say that it's written OK. Just say OK, and your DMR radio here should be ready to go. Now let's take a look at the operation of your DMR radio for using this program that we've just entered into the code plug. First of all, you can select a zone on the 878 UV2 Plus by going to the zone that's titled OS4 Control. Next, you want to select your desired mode of operation, one of the 3. Once you've selected that, using the middle button for the selection, push the push to talk button just for a couple of seconds. You should see the light flashing on the openSPOT. Next, you rotate the selector on top of the D878 to S local 9, and if you do that quickly, right after you release the push button, you'll hear an audio announcement coming back to you from the hotspot that it has prepared the openSPOT and it's ready, and then it'll tell you that it has switched to whatever mode that you've selected. Note that it takes the hotspot about 15 to 20 seconds to reset to the selected mode, so you have a little time to switch over to the local 9 in order to hear the announcement. Another method I sometimes use, I've got the MD390. I just put that on local 9 so that push the push button on the 878, and then it echoes back on the MD390 on local 9. That way I don't have to do the fast switching back and forth. Also, the last bullet here says that the hotspot now receives the channel programmed in the hotspot. The D-Star and C4FM program only one reflector at a time in the dashboard settings. For example, on D-Star, I have it set to one of the more popular reflectors, which is 31 Charlie. So you can set those within the dashboard, which we'll take a look at in the next few slides there. Note that you can change the reflectors in the dashboard and have them, they will be programmed then in the dashboard. You don't have to go back and change your code plug. Let's take a look at the openSPOT 4 Pro dashboard once again. You'll notice that in the blue line at the top we've selected status. And at the bottom of that, you see where the arrow is a little drop-down menu that you can select to whichever mode you want to use. When you select that, it also gives you this little menu here to do the selection, which shows all of the different profiles. And you could program different modes into these different profiles, as well as the 3 that we have selected and worked with in this particular video. Next on the dashboard, we select the connectors on that main menu bar at the top. We now go to the D-Star reflectors, and this is where you can change either the D-Star or the C4FM reflector if you've chosen that mode of operation. And so here we have the reference 001 selected here off of a drop-down menu. This is another popular channel or reflector on D-Star. And also the letter associated with the reflector, it would be in the next box, which is C. So this is 001 Charlie, as it's called. Also, once you have entered those numbers and letters in there, you want to hit this save button. And this will automatically change then the reflector that's programmed into your hotspot. So when you select from your radio either the profile 2 or 3, in this case it's profile 2 for D-Star, it'll go to 001 Charlie now instead of the 031 Charlie there. Well, I hope you're not too badly confused, but if you are, don't give up yet. I've got another method here that's really simple, and if you don't want to mess with the code plug, there's a simple switching method you can use that leaves your original code plug all intact, and you can still control the cross mode switching in your openSPOT 4 by using a manual switching on your DMR radio. So first of all, you set up your openSPOT 4 Pro as described in the previous slides. Now to change the switch positions for cross mode, you can use manual dial. This is a feature on many DMR radios. Instead of setting up the channels and zones in the code plug and going through all of that, I hope going through that has given you a little better understanding of what's going on. However, what you can do here if you want to get started on it a little sooner or using a simpler method, here is one. First, on the 878, you can select a zone that has this S local 9 Brandmaster talk group TG9, and has that already programmed into your radio. Then on the menu, you can select the talk group, which is at the top of the menu, I believe, and select then next manual dial, and under the private ID, which appears at the top of the box that pops up when you select manual dial, just enter the numbers 9001 if you want to use DMR, and push the push to talk button. I'll get that straight yet. On the left side of the handheld for a couple of seconds to select the DMR mode. This should also work for other DMR radios that have a manual dial and maybe has a built-in code plug which you don't want to mess with. For example, on the TYT, the MD390 I have, you can press menu and then contacts and manual dial, enter the number 9001, 2, or 3, and it'll go to the associated profile. Then go to the openSPOT 4 Pro, and you'll hear it respond with audio that you're connected to DMR when you're listening on that channel 9 talk group there. Enter 9002 for D-Star or 9003 for C4 FM, which is your Yaesu or your Fusion. And it does take about 15 to 20 seconds, as I mentioned before, for the reset to occur to the selected mode. So I hope this video has helped you out, and if you have any comments, be sure to give them to me. If you see errors in here, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I'm just sharing what I've learned in the last year as I've gone through the learning process, just as many of you as you have gone through as well. So thanks for viewing. Oh, by the way, if you don't have a DMR radio and you want to get on DMR anyway, here's something you can do. You get a DMR ID from radioid.net. Once that ID number has been issued to you, you can download an application for your Android phone. It's called DroidStar, and you can use your cell phone as a radio to connect directly to the network and talk to hams all around the world. So you can get that through the Play Store on Google, and there's a couple other methods also that you don't need a radio, and there's some hams that are using this and report success with it. I haven't tried it yet. I have used DroidStar, and that works quite well. The one for the computer is called Blue DV, and it takes a little plug-in dongle there to connect to your Wi-Fi system and into the internet, and then you can get into the various modes of operation there too with DMR or D-Star, YSF. And then there's a third way that if you want to get into some of the digital modes there on Echolink, which is a free program. You can download that, and some of the locations on there bridge over to some of these digital modes, so you will be able to access them that way as well. So again, thanks for watching. I like to try new things, and I've got a challenge for you today, is to try something new. It's a new digital world out there in ham radio, and keep active, and maybe we'll see you on the HF bands too one of these days. 73s from Gary, W0DYD in Shakopee, Minnesota.